So it's part of a range of measures to try and help young people who are facing unemployment as a result of the pandemic. It's also supposed to help businesses to recover from the last lockdown and the current lockdown in terms of support around staffing. So it's a £2 billion scheme. And it essentially means that if a business creates a placement for a young person, the government will pay the national minimum wage for 25 hours a week for 6 months. So the idea is that businesses create placements for young people, and the government covers the wage costs of those people up to a maximum of the national minimum wage at 25 hours a week for 6 months. It is aimed at young people. It's currently aimed at 16 to 24-year-olds who are claiming universal credit. So businesses can't go out and choose their own candidates or generate their own candidate pools. The job centres will refer 4 or 5 young people to each placement or vacancy that a business creates, and the business will then decide which of those young people it wants to appoint. So it's important to note that you can't advertise these placements yourselves and go out and generate your own candidate pools. It's the job centres that will send candidates for the roles. In addition to paying a wage subsidy for 6 months, the government will also give every employer creating a placement £1,500 per placement. And the £1,500 is supposed to help businesses with setup costs. So, for example, if you had to buy a young person a laptop, or you had to buy a young person PPE, clothing or equipment, you would use part of your £1,500 to do that. In return for paying the wage subsidy and the £1,500, government or DWP expect each employer to make sure that the young person on placement receives a personal development plan. So an element of training and development, and that is really supposed to focus on workplace behaviours, so attendance, punctuality, team working, following instruction, that kind of thing. And then a very heavy emphasis on identifying occupations or job roles that the young person would like to move into should they not be kept on by the placement employer, and giving the young person assistance with job search, CVs, application forms, and interview techniques. So in summary, it's 25 hours a week, national minimum wage for 6 months. It's a £1,500 grant, but the employer has to either themselves deliver or arrange for somebody else to deliver a personal development programme to the young person. And it's just important to note that it's the job centres that will refer candidates to you. You can't go out and identify your own. The other thing, or the other couple of points that are important to bear in mind, is that the government doesn't want to see Kickstart placements displacing existing workers. So if you're running a warehouse with 10 warehouse people working in it, and you've just made 5 warehouse workers redundant, and you put forward a placement for 5 placements for warehouse workers, DWP will reject your application, because it's quite clear that the business is then using a government-funded programme to displace permanent employment. The other thing that the government will look at, or DWP will assess as applications go in, is whether the business has already advertised the roles on the jobs market corresponding to the placements they're advertising. So it displace permanent or temporary workers in your business, or vacancies that you're advertising on the jobs market. These placements must be additional to your normal workforce. In terms of how you apply to join the programme, if you can't, the DWP will accept applications from businesses who can create 30 placements or more. So a good example of that is Tesco, who've created hundreds of placements across the country, and Tesco will deal directly with DWP. But if you can only create 29 or fewer placements, you have to apply through a gateway organisation, as it's known, and the gateway organisations will group employers' applications together until they get to the magic 30, and then they will apply on behalf of a group of employers to DWP to get those placements approved and candidates flowing through from the job centres. I've had discussion with colleagues at Stockport MBC and the growth company who I work for are launching 3 services to support businesses in terms of Kickstart. The first service is that we will be a gateway organisation. We will group together employer applications and submit those applications on behalf of employers. And we have a long track record of working with DWP and applying for government grants on behalf of businesses. So we should be pretty good at that, but it's a new programme and we'll have to see how the first few applications go. The second service we're offering to businesses is to provide a personal development programme for each young person on placement. And that will cover the DWP requirements around workplace skills and behaviours and job search and trying to find a new job towards the end of the placement. But we will charge employers for that service. So we will charge £500 for that service, and we would take that money from the grant, the £1,500 grant that employers receive for creating a placement. The third service we want to offer, but we're in discussion with DWP around, is an employment vehicle service. We've already heard anecdotally that DWP are very worried about commercial recruitment agencies getting involved in Kickstart and potentially abusing the scheme. What we're proposing to do is use our own in-house recruitment agency to employ young people on contracts of employment, not contracts for service, but proper contracts of employment fixed for 6 months. And then we will second those young people to employers hosting the placement. And the reason we want to run that service is because the wage subsidy will be paid at the moment, the wage subsidy will be paid in month 4 and month 7. So if you're a very small organisation and you take somebody on the national minimum wage, you could end up with at least 14 weeks worth of cash flow to cover. And that won't be an insignificant amount for some smaller businesses. And we want to make sure as many businesses as possible take advantage of the programme and help young people and get extra resource into their business. The other reason we want to run an employment vehicle is because we'd like to have a bit more control over the young people coming through the programme. We want to make sure that young people get a standard induction programme, a standard probation policy and period, that they operate to standard HR policies and procedures, and to make sure that those young people are managed properly through placements. So that would be an advantage to the young person. It would also probably be an advantage to smaller businesses who don't have sophisticated HR departments and things like that. I think that's probably the main features of the programme and the main features of the service we intend to offer. As I say, we've agreed to partner with Stockport Local Authority to deliver this. And if businesses are interested in applying through us or taking up any of our services, you should go through the Stockport Jobs Match website to do that.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. Appreciate that. While we're talking about the support that the growth company and the council and generally that's available, is there anything that you can add, Nick, in terms of, or Dan, in terms of the support that is available to businesses that's come out there, the job support scheme that is replacing the furlough? Nick, could you perhaps give us a bit of a roundup on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So if I'll just finally add to what Ian was just saying around Kickstart. I mean, for the council's perspective, it's a really important offer, and we were looking to be an intermediary organisation ourselves, like the growth company were, but actually the opportunity to collaborate with the growth company I think is going to ensure that we can really have the capacity to ensure there's a great offer in the Stockport area for all employees and young people, and using the growth company's expertise and skill in actually making sure those training opportunities are in place to support what's needed. So as Ian said, just to finalise, this will be a Stockport programme that's done in collaboration between the council and the growth company. And as he said, if we're going to have a link up on the Jobs Match website for employers to obviously to express their interest on there. So yeah, it's very much a collaboration between ourselves and the growth company. Just on the job support scheme, Yeah, so there's obviously been a little bit of change to what was announced recently. So initially, when the Chancellor first announced about the job support scheme, it was obviously the follow-on to the job retention scheme, and it would be on the basis of the sort of the generic offer of so as an example, if an employer was bringing someone back part-time on a third of the hours, the employer would pay that third of the salary plus another third of the individual salary, and the government would pay the remaining third. So the government would never pay more than 2/3 of the salary on the job support scheme. I think that was capped at about £697 a month. But also they obviously have announced in the last few days the additional extension to the job support scheme. So when it comes in place, so if a business is forced to close legally under the obviously under the new restrictions, depending on which tier they're in, if they're required to close, the government will now pay 67% of an individual's salary. Obviously, if that individual can't be working because the business is closed. We know the job support scheme will start on the 1st of November, so it will follow on from when the job retention scheme, or the furlough as it was known, is ending, and we're expecting the job support scheme is going to run through till April 2021. A bit like with Kickstart, as Ian mentioned earlier, on the job support scheme, gov.uk has got loads of information on it about what's involved, how employers will be able to apply for it. So that's probably the key points to highlight at the moment. Obviously, it's a moving picture in terms of for Stockport businesses, in terms of whether they'll be under the sort of be able to access it under the generic offer, or if any businesses are unable to trade later on, there will be the additional support in place. But obviously, we're expecting to see some more guidance come out about the extended offer in the next few days.
No, I think, as Nick says, we're just kind of waiting for a bit more of the detail about the mechanics of the scheme in terms of that extension arrangement. I think the only other thing I would flag, like Ian did, about the earlier scheme is that, again, I think it's something that businesses would have to claim retrospectively. So, cash flow may well be an issue. So it might be that the employer's got to pay the wages to the staff and then claim them back from the government after the fact. So that's just something to bear in mind. But obviously, as soon as we've got more detail, we'll try and produce some kind of guidance, some fact sheet that's digestible, and let people know what the scheme rules are.